find it to be the initially the simplest, and yet perhaps incredibly complex because of those color relationships that you choose. And you really do have to, it looks so simple that you have to give credit to the curator in the museum to realize, I think I need to look at this a little more and not just run by it, because there's got to be more here if they're going to hang it on the wall, right? And there's so much there. And the show that you were in at the ICA, The Space Between, for us was all about the slowing down and just not taking, you know, simple abstraction at face value, but deciding that perhaps there must be something else here that I need to kind of be thinking about and slowing down and contemplating. And I think that your work does that. It also speaks to, you know, those light and space artists that came before, and where does an artwork begin and where does it end? Because especially with your 3D pieces, the shadow is as much a part of that piece as the part that you fabricated, right?
Yeah, and it is about what you see and whether you see it there, and some people may not even see it, or they may walk by, but
yeah,
that's okay because other people will. And,
yeah. And for some of you who do know Lorraine, because I don't know her, and I've only just become familiar with her work and read a little bit about it, but it seems that as much as she is using chance in her work, it's to reach a certain place that coalesces in something that looks like a landscape or some kind of narrative. Is that right?
So the Ursilia, the big painting there, she said was inspired by and drawn from Italo Calvino's Book of Invisible Cities.
Yeah, right.
And these are all fantasy narratives about impossible cities that are not built with bricks and mortar, but they may be built with things like sadness that hangs like yellow dust in the air. You know, so it's very narrative, very poetic, very evocative, and she named this painting after one of those invisible cities.
Yeah, I just find that so interesting and such a huge contrast. I mean, maybe that's the biggest contrast between Nancy's work and Lorraine's work. And then, you know, there's lots of other things that come in between. Mary, you actually have this sort of fictional, organic vocabulary, right?
Yeah.
And you're using, well, you are sometimes using organic elements to create your objects or draw your drawings. And other times you're using inorganic materials to create works that look organic. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like why you decide to either use a branch or use a piece of wire?
Well, I worked on paper for many years, and when I realized I was drawing sculptural things, I started, the first thing I used to get off the paper was a black annealed piece of wire, because to me it looked like a pencil line. So the first things I used were man-made, and then for years I've collected all kinds of pods and branches and seeds and leaves and rocks, and so those things.
One of the most fun studios to go to.
Oh,
yes.
It's got a lot of stuff in it. So these things began to make their way into the sculpture by either, you know, wrapping wire around or drilling a hole through the pods and threading the wire through. So I began to integrate the collected natural objects with the wire form. And then anything linear became fodder for the studio work, and whether it was a stick or a spun steel wool thread or string. But I found man-made objects besides, you know, wire off a spool. Anything that just, I know it's hard to say, you know, you walk down the street and you find a piece of debris and you're, I can work with that. I am the ultimate collector. And be here for a long time, but I do make these hybrid forms, to get back to your original question. And that's an area of exploration that I really enjoy, making up new forms. That's a thrill to me, and I use anything as source matter and just about anything as material these days.
And Jenny, you too are kind of using these kind of fictional, botanical kinds of forms.
Yes. And, you know, I think one thing I want to quickly touch on is the concept that you were talking about, simplicity and complexity when you're combining. And that's something I always like to play with in dichotomy in my work, is how can I take something complex but make it look simple and clean and neat. And, yeah, as you can tell, I'm pretty organized and clean with these ladies. But I think I do get that inspiration from nature. And I see myself, as Mari's talking, my birthday gift for my husband is welding classes at the Crucible. And I see myself taking the drawings to large-scale sculpture. And so as you say that, you know, it sounds similar to where I see my work coming too.
There's a huge relationship, in case you haven't ever thought about it, between drawing and sculpture. And to me, the most beautiful shows I've ever seen have been sculptors' drawings. I saw a show at the Drawing Center in New York that had Donatello's drawings next to David Smith and Louise Bourgeois, and there was such a synchrony. And it's that there's some kind of muscularity about a sculptor's drawing that loves the form and loves the belly of the sail, that loves that feeling of that. And I know I started out as a sculptor. And that's partly the architecture stuff, but it's mostly the feeling of actual physical form. And I think it's an extraordinarily physical show, strangely enough, you know.
Yeah. And in fact, there's really only one sort of, I mean, the word traditional doesn't seem quite right, but in terms of a big 3D sculptural piece would be yours, Amy, on the floor, right? I mean, the installation piece, yes, sculpture, sure, but really in terms of the way we would best define sculpture, it would be your installation piece. And do you want to speak a little bit about that piece? Because it caught me a little off guard in terms of the rest of the show. So.
Well, it's interesting you think of it as traditional.
Well, no, I just say that only in terms of if you were to go into that and think, well, was there any sculpture? Oh yeah, it was that piece there. You wouldn't necessarily think of Mary's or Nancy's as sculpture, right?
And Sharon's very much.
And Sharon, excuse me.
Sharon walks the line, and also
Sharon walks
Emily's
the line.
pods hanging in the window are sculptural installation.
Right.
But blood and guts over there.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
The blood and guts.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to use the show as an opportunity to take the paintings off the wall. And so I really saw the installation as an extension of some of the things that are going on in